Hello again, witches, seekers, and friends, and welcome to the Fat Feminist Witch podcast, the show where we do a little ranting, raving, and wand waving. I'm your host, Paige Vanderbeck, and together we're going to explore magic and spirituality, social justice, the psychic realm, and truly modern witchcraft. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Fat Feminist Witch podcast, the first episode of the Fat Feminist Witch podcast of 2025, which is very late. It's April already, but this year has been quite the dumpster fire. 4 months in, and it's already a little bit too much. So I'm coming in a little bit late, but I hope you will forgive me. I have a very good reason, which is that everything that I was working on at the beginning of the year was just way too much of a fucking bummer. That is the very real reason for that. Globally and politically, this year has been very difficult, very scary. There's lots of really big, scary changes all over the place. And unfortunately, in my family, in my life, I guess, my personal life, this was also very true. I had lots of deaths in the family and things like that. So it's been a pretty intense couple of months. And the episodes that I was working on at the beginning of the year were very, they were full of righteous anger, which I love. It's my whole vibe. But that was just a bit too dark, and focusing on it all the time, it wasn't making me feel better. I wasn't feeling empowered. I just felt like I was dragging myself further and further down. Late last year, like in late July last year, actually, I entered into a depressive episode, which is something that happens with my type of depression. It was totally random. Things were mostly pretty good. And then suddenly I'm like, clinically depressed. And that didn't let up for 8 months, meaning that just ended recently, which is wild because everything was awful. I had just lost my best friend, my cat Clover, who had to be put down very suddenly. I had all of these deaths in the family. I had all of these changes in my life, and I still have a lot of things that are stressing me out. So I'm sad, but I'm not depressed. Somehow, in the midst of all of that, my depression lifted. I'm going to give spring a little bit of credit there because that definitely helps. But mostly it's just that is something that happens. My depression can come on very suddenly, and it also ends very suddenly, and it's kind of out of my control. So when you spend so much time, 8 months is a pretty long time to spend in survival mode, where everything kind of sucks. When you spend that much time like that, the moment that it stops, the moment that the sun comes out and this gray world you've been living in suddenly sparkles with color, it's so special, and you can't really ignore it. You can't let it go, because who knows how long this is going to last. Hopefully I get a lot of time before it happens again. If it happens again, I'm going to stay hopeful. I'm going to stay delusional. Let's go with that. So today we are going to talk about color instead. Instead of going with all of the dark and the gray, I am going to shift focus completely to color. I've talked about color magic in a lot of different episodes. I love color, I love creativity, and I love combining them with spirituality. I will also just work conversations about color and color meaning and symbolism into pretty much every conversation that I can. I'm a bit of a fan of colors, you could say. Of course, I wear almost entirely black clothes every day, but that's just because I like to look super hot and vaguely threatening. I have very good priorities, but but that means that I'm much more selective in the colors that I include in my self-expression that are not black. Every color is chosen intentionally. Every shade or hue has meaning. Every swatch of paint or fabric, every little dusting of makeup, all of that is a spell. All of that is energy. And it's not just It's not just the things that I wear. Days have colors, months, years, they all have an associated color. People have them. Types of music, songs, even individual words have colors associated with them. I see and smell and feel colors everywhere. And I use color to describe things, even though it's a bit hard for other people to pick up what I'm saying. Color is very subjective. A couple of years ago, the internet discovered a neurological, I guess you could say it's a condition, though that makes it sound like a disease. It's synesthesia. I honestly think it could fall under the umbrella term of neurodivergence, as it's just a different way of perception of thinking. Anyway, synesthesia is a difference in perception. It causes people to experience stimulating things with other senses than what they're normally associated with. So for today's topic, the experience of hearing music or sounds and experiencing colors or images in response to that is probably our most relevant example. The most common and the coolest sounding version of synesthesia, which is why it's the one that the internet picked up on, of course, it usually means that people will actually see waves of color in response to music, or maybe that the words that someone is speaking to them will flash across their vision in color. Like, when someone's very angry at them, those words might be visible in front of them as if they are subtitles written in red ink. It's an angry color. That is called projective synesthesia. You experience something and it projects in front of your vision. You see the world through this lens. There is also associative synesthesia, which the internet failed to make quite so popular. Because it just doesn't sound as fun. So naturally, I didn't know about it until recently, when a therapist pointed out that I seem to associate colors with way more things than is perhaps common. I feel a very strong and totally involuntary connection between whatever it is that I'm experiencing and color. It's not something I see. It's something I just feel and just know. And this is a bit of a tangent. I'm sorry, but I like to share stuff like this because I know that there's someone out there who's going to hear it and be like, oh my God, wait, that's me. The fact that I don't see colors, but I associate them as like a gut feeling, it makes a lot of sense for the way my brain works. I take in a lot of information visually. I'm a very visual person, you could say, but the output from my brain is rarely very visual. My internal monologue, my dreams, my daydreams and fantasies, I don't really see pictures. I'm not watching a movie, I'm reading a book, or I guess you could say I'm writing it. Even when I tried really serious hallucinogens like mushrooms and LSD, I didn't see anything cool and psychedelic, but my little internal storyteller went absolutely wild. Even what you could call my psychic skills, it's intuition. I'm very intuitive. I have gut feelings and suddenly just knowing things. It's synchronicity, things just happen to kind of fall into place. And I didn't know why I was doing something or going in a certain direction or trying something a different way. I just knew that I had to, and it lined up perfectly. So it makes sense that even something like synesthesia would work in me and my brain in a way that's more associative and strictly visual. Of course, experiencing color in a non-visual way sounds pretty crazy to some people, but I sound pretty crazy to some people, so I'm okay with it. I think synesthesia has influenced a lot of our spiritual concepts more than people really know. Certain things probably come to mind, like the colors we associate with different chakras, or maybe how we use different colored crystals for different things. And then there are also aura colors. An aura is a spiritual field that exists around your body. It contains your spiritual matter. It protects you from the world around you. And auras all have a specific color that says something about who you are or about what you're going through. They can change throughout your life, or you can have, one solid color. This is something you can get professionally done, of course, and there are lots of people who see auras and either do it professionally or don't really know what they're doing. I have actually had my aura read twice, 2 separate times. And what I think happened was I met two different people who psychically perceive auras, but both of them have synesthesia. And one of them has projective synesthesia, while the other one is associative. So the first young woman, she didn't quite know what she was doing. She came in when I was working at a witch store. And she was asking us about colors and about auras, it was something she had heard about. And she told us that she didn't see anything, but when she looked at someone or talked to someone, they had a color. She associated a color with a person. She told me that my color, she just got this strong feeling, and it was blue. She had to look around the store, and she found something that was the exact color blue. And it's the color of like evil eye pendants, like cobalt glass, which of course she didn't know this, but I love it and have been collecting it since I was a kid. I also look really good in it, so that's great. She didn't see the color around me. She just knew it was there. She couldn't even describe what color blue it was until she found something that was the right color. And again, she just knew that was it. It was a candle, actually. And I thought that was really, really weird and interesting, but also, it was very cool. I couldn't forget it. That's a color that I love, and that definitely features very strongly in my spiritual practice. Then a few months later, someone else came into the store. It was actually a couple. And this man read auras in a more traditional way that you may think of. He looked at you, and through his psychic senses, he saw colors around you. He'd been doing it forever. He knew what he did. He knew he did it. And he knew that these colors were considered aura colors, but he didn't know quite what every color meant. He just knew that he saw them. So when he looked at me, he told me that my aura was primarily blue, and he described it, and it's the exact same color of blue. But he also saw like a little bit of violet in my aura up around my head, and then this really bright orange color that was, around my chest and under my armpit on the left side, right around where my heart is, Blue and purple are very witchy. Ego boost, right? I'm super witch. I've got this very blue color that is associated with the third eye and with psychic power. And then you have violet, which is the color of the crown chakra and communicating with the universe. Orange was a bit of a confusing thing for me, though. Orange is not a color that I would ever associate with myself. It's a very beautiful color, and I love it in nature, and I love it everywhere except anywhere near my body. It looks terrible. It makes my skin look bad. Everything about it is bad on me. Although a little bit of like rustic, earthy brown orange is cool, but whatever. So orange is not a color that I use a lot. Even in magic, it wasn't something I used all the time. And I realized that I actually didn't know a lot of the associations of orange beyond it's fiery. Magically, orange is used to represent creativity, restless energy a little bit, enthusiasm, sexuality, and pleasure. It's used in road opening spells and rituals, so it's like opportunities and a little bit of prosperity, but it's more the ability to go out and manifest what it is that you want. And there are lots of different colors of orange and lots of different ways we use orange. Sometimes we use it to warn of danger. Sometimes it's light and summery and relaxing, like, the color like creamsicles, right? Sometimes it's that deep, cool, earthy, orange brown that makes you feel really cool and autumn-like. It's all very nice. But what is that color doing there? And the more I thought about it, this optimistic and enthusiastic color around my heart is no doubt related to my depression and my general feeling of not having a place in the world, always looking for something. That orange bit there is telling me that my best guide is my heart and my creativity and my emotions, and that is how I should interact with the world. It's also the color of the sacral chakra and is telling me to trust my gut. That's where my gut feelings come from. That's my intuition. My heart is my compass, and if I follow it, I will find the road that will take me to where it is I need to go. My depression is unfortunately a constant in my life. It's not something that I'm never going to deal with ever again. Though again, I'm staying delusional. It's gone forever. I'm really happy. But even when it gets really bad, my heart it hasn't given up quite yet, has it? I keep finding some small little thing, something that's totally unimportant, something common, something not special, to tell me that life is worth living. Orange is the color of sunsets, something totally unremarkable that happens every single day. And yet, we all consider them to be one of the most beautiful things that you can possibly see. We stop to look at sunsets. We travel to far off places just to see what it looks like when the sun sets there. In the fall, when pumpkin spice season comes around, it makes me super happy. It makes tons of us happy. Pumpkin spice is not necessary. Pumpkin isn't even a necessary part of our diet. It's just a silly little treat. It serves no other purpose than to, bring us a little bit of pleasure, of delight. My big, dumb, bleeding heart is working so hard, not only to keep me alive. It's not only survival mode that I'm in. It gives me a reason to find things that make me want to keep going. And that is something that's visible to a stranger, which is really wild. And it's something I kind of forgot about until recently. So I'm happy I remembered that. That's a fun memory. But either way, since that time, orange has been kind of a different color for me. It's much happier. It's something I like to include a lot more intentionally. You know what I mean? And a few years ago, when I started identifying different things that might be related to the goddess of pleasure, orange was one of the first colors that popped into my head. So now I think of orange as something that's more of an innate part of me. And I'll be honest, I see more of it everywhere. I notice orange things a lot more, and things in that general range of colors do tend to make me feel more optimistic and hopeful for the future. Now, maybe auras and the ability to see or experience auras is completely separate from this thing in our brains that creates synesthesia. But believing that would require me to think that we are made of completely different stuff than the rest of the supernatural and spiritual universe, and that just seems like too big of a coincidence to me. Think what you like, I guess. But in my opinion, there's no reason why someone with synesthesia couldn't also have this ability to read or work with auras, and naturally that would filter through their brain and through the way their perception works. So I think they're related. Aura colors, interestingly, are not the only place synesthesia specifically shows up in modern magic. Without someone who is a synesthete, who also had access to a really good record collection, the tarot would look much different. The art in the Rider-Waite Tarot, which is considered the most common standard deck, and a lot of modern decks are a version of the Rider-Waite Tarot. This was drawn by an artist named Pamela Coleman Smith. She never really got enough credit for her part in the deck's creation, which is why you'll see a lot of people call it the Rider-Waite Smith deck now. The defining difference between this version of the tarot and the ones that had come before was the artwork in the minor arcana. The tarot is divided into two parts, 78 cards. You have 22 major arcana and 56 minor arcana. Tarot began as a card game. So if you think of a deck of regular playing cards, which is not what it looked like, but think of a deck of regular playing cards. When you get to cards like, 2s and 3s, you didn't see, a vibrant picture of kings or queens or anything like that. You just saw 2 or 3 little symbols, hearts and diamonds, or swords and cups. It was nothing really all that special. The cards themselves had deeper meanings, but it wasn't represented in the artwork until this deck. This artist, she preferred to be called Pixie, so that's what I'm going to call it for the rest of the episode. She was already a working artist. She was also an occultist, and she liked to draw and paint with mystical and mythological themes, and she was a part of different occult societies in London. So on Christmas Day in the year 1900, she developed, or perhaps maybe just first noticed, that when listening to music, she got this flash, an entire outline of what would become a stunning and a very unique watercolor painting later. It just flashed across her vision while she was listening to Bach. And this painting is wild. Even for watercolor, the details in it seem to move and flow together, like it was even more watery than watercolor usually is. She continued to use music as her inspiration when she was, painting, and she and drew whatever it is that she saw while it played. She did that for a few years, but she didn't really advertise it. It wasn't what she did professionally. But she had a friend, the poet, W.B. Yeats. He thought this was really beautiful and really remarkable, and he was very excited about it, and he wanted her to get it out there more and to have people see what she could do. Yeats was working with a musician named Arnold Dolmetsch, and they were doing this art show. Dolmetsch created music, and Yeats would create poetry that went with it. And they invited Pixie there, and it became this dynamic multimedia art show with music, poetry, and art all being created simultaneously. Pixie sat there, and as the music played in front of an audience of people, she sketched out dozens, like 30 huge drawings inspired entirely by whatever it is that she's in the music. It wasn't anything that she saw anywhere else. It was entirely vibes. It was vibes according to whatever it is that she was hearing. And from that moment, it became kind of a defining characteristic of her art. A lot of different musicians at the time were so excited to see what she would create in response to their art. Claude Debussy, who wrote Clair de Lune, which is one of the most, magical pieces of music ever, he called her art dreams made visible. And about his own music, he said, "You have not only captured the idea of which was in my mind, but carried it further." And I love this because, if you get very literal synesthesia, she was experiencing a little bit more of that music. She was experiencing that music with more senses than other people were. So the tarot deck, let's get back there. She was commissioned by a fellow occultist and a friend of hers named A.E. Waite, which is where we get Waite in the deck, to create a new tarot deck, one with imagery that conveyed occult concepts in the ways that he practiced. He didn't necessarily like the decks that were available at the time, nor did he really agree with all of the interpretation. So he wanted to create something, right from the beginning. He was not an artist. He cared a lot about the ideas and the concepts, and he needed somebody who could really interpret them through art. And so, Pixie is what we get. The Minors had never been particularly illustrated before. They had no established symbolism beyond cups, swords, wands, pentacles. So that was left to Pixie entirely, all 56 of those cards. And now what we have is 56 cards, all with incredibly meaningful, there's a million symbols packed into every single card that you see. There are entire scenes, there are different figures, there are different symbols that all tell you what each one of these cards means. Waite was a bit of a dick, as were, many men at the time when it came to women's work. He was kind of dismissive, but even he could admit that the art that she put into these cards inspired much stronger emotional reactions than other decks before, and this allowed people to read the cards a little more intuitively. Even if you don't know exactly what the 10 of Pentacles means, when you look at it and you see this big scene of a family with lots of prosperity and, this rainbow overhead and everything, you definitely get an emotional feeling. You see happiness and togetherness and prosperity. That is very important for the tarot deck. That's very important for when you're reading. Not everyone has access to a million different sources of interpretive, books and things like that. So being able to just see it and get a feeling and know what's happening, it made the tarot much more accessible to a lot of people. Color was another big thing in this deck, and there is one color that stands out above all others when it comes to the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, and that is yellow. And I mean bright, staring directly at the sun kind of yellow. It is everywhere. It's including it, like it's in the sky. Entire backgrounds, which are obviously supposed to be the open sky, are bright, bright yellow. And you might even have the figure in the foreground wearing even more yellow. This is actually something that people don't love about the original version of the deck. That's why we have so many new modern versions that look almost exactly the same, but all the skies have been painted blue. It's kind of a polarizing design choice, right? And you can argue with that and be like, yeah, but yellow represents the sun and optimism and enlightenment. It shouldn't be annoying. And we can say that until we're blue in the face. Rim shot. But yellow is also the color of poison, caution tape around crime scenes, sickness, cowardice, and then stinging insects like yellow jackets, which are my arch nemesis. Yellow is often used to get our attention. It's not always in this beautiful, positive, sunny way. As a solar color, we often think of yellow as fiery, but in modern magic, it is associated with the element of air, the planet Mercury, and the sign Gemini. The sign vote is most likely to run their fucking mouth. So it's there again is that little bit of danger, right? I actually looked it up, and Pixie herself was an air sign, but Aquarius. A little bit more artistic and innovative than Gemini is in terms of air signs. So that's kind of fun. But it makes sense that she included so much yellow in the deck because it is a color that signifies light and illumination and enlightenment, revealing the truth. It conveys joy and pleasure, but it also has caution. It reminds you to pay attention to where that joy and that pleasure that you're experiencing is coming from and where it's taking you. Obviously, you don't have to be hardwired to experience color the same way that she did to include it in your spiritual practice or to just be inspired by it. But sometimes I think it's good to be reminded how magical, just our regular, mundane human brains are. That magic is kind of woven into us right at the source. Color has always been rich with symbolism in religions all over the world. If I asked some of you to pick a single color that represents modern witchcraft, magic, and mysticism, I would wager that the vast majority of you would choose a shade of purple. It's magical and it's mystical and it's ancient, it's luxurious, it reminds us of the night sky filled with stars. It's a beautiful color, and it's becomes kind of synonymous with witches and witchy girls. The creation and use of purple has marked significant changes and advances all the way through human history. In France, during the Neolithic period, people created purple paint with manganese and hematite. And so those cave paintings that we can still see today were made with purple paint. The oldest purple textiles or fabric that we know of are from the late Bronze Age in a royal tomb in Syria. Centuries later, the most famous version of purple dye, which is called Tyrian purple, was created in the Mediterranean using sea snails. It took thousands and thousands of crushed up snail shells that were all processed by hand, of course, and had to be watched like a hawk because the process had to be stopped at exactly the right time, just to make a solid pigment that could be used to dye the fabric. So it was very expensive. It was very time-consuming, and the use of it was reserved for the very wealthy, for royals, and with people with great religious significance like priests. The Romans especially really took to it, and they used it in their togas to represent status based on which part of the toga was dyed purple. And it got real fun when some of the most comically unhinged Roman emperors got really into it and literally killed people to try and keep purple for themselves. Caligula had the last Roman king of Mauritania killed because he wanted this beautiful purple cloak that the king had. And Nero forbade commoners from using certain shades of purple dye. And eventually, the sale and creation of purple textiles was enforced with the death penalty throughout the Roman Empire. Purple was not a purely Mediterranean color, though. It was everywhere. In China, Japan, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Polynesia, people created purple dye using different sea creatures, different snails, different sea urchins, but they all created this purple dye. And even though these people didn't communicate with each other, they were spread out all over the world. They created this dye, and then they used it almost exclusively for royals and spiritual leaders, or in paint and ink to create their, most significant iconography. It wasn't just the rarity of purple that made them associated with spirituality. However, it wasn't just that it was expensive, and so let's deck the priests out in purple. It was considered a spiritual color. And this, again, was true in a lot of these different places. In China, it was associated with the North Star, which is the home of the ruler of the heavens. And in Taoism, purple, it's like a liminal color. It contains the energies of both yin and yang. So how did purple go from being the symbol of royalty and kings and the dominant religions to being the official mascot color for witches and pagans? As far as I can tell, it is because of women's suffrage. Women fighting for the right to vote. In England, the colors of the women's suffrage movement were purple, white, and green. Purple was chosen because it's the color of sovereignty and freedom and of, steadfast commitment to a cause. White represented purity because, always got to have that in there. And then green was the color of spring and of change. In America, they replaced green with gold, which is the color of light and life. But that very strong meaning of purple remained. In the 1960s, it became associated with drug use and counterculture, rock and roll. Thank you, Jimi Hendrix, for Purple Haze. In the 70s, it was a favorite in the women's liberation movement. These 2 decades is also when New Age spirituality made it over to North America, and purple became the color of spiritual and social enlightenment. So like everything else in modern witchcraft, it always ties back to feminism's various waves throughout history. We use purple in magic for spiritual growth, psychic energy, healing, success, innovation, and creativity, and wisdom. We also see it as something of a liminal color, containing the energy of both the physical and the spiritual. It is both hot and cold, fire and water, light and darkness. It's associated with the crown chakra, which is the seat of our most spiritual selves, and is the point through which we communicate with the universe or the divine. But why? If you'll recall, when I was talking about the places where purple has had great significance, I didn't mention India, where the chakras originated. So why is the most spiritual energy center of our bodies purple? The chakra system originated in about 1500 BCE during the Vedic period, which is the late Bronze Age again. And at the time, the chakras were not each associated with a color. They were associated with attributes and energies. The ancient Vedic religion formed the basis of many of Hinduism's practices and deities and things. And the ancient texts, the Vedas, still feature prominently in the religion, but the two are quite different. We don't know exactly when the shift, fully happened, but it was a very long time ago. And Hinduism is potentially the oldest surviving religion in the world. Associating each chakra with a color is a Hindu influence, much like their practice of assigning colors to deities. The most significant and sacred colors in India, however, are red and saffron, and purple is barely mentioned at all in ancient texts. Color associations with the chakras didn't appear until about the 16th century, and the colors as we know them, in the order of Isaac Newton's, light spectrum, are a product of Victorian occultists like the Theosophical Society, who revered Newton's, all of his other work, both scientific and arcane, the stuff like alchemy. This rainbow system wasn't totally universal, however. And I actually found a book from around this time about the chakras, and in it are illustrations of each point in brilliant color as seen by a psychic. And while you could say that the crown is vaguely purplish, it's mainly because it contains all the colors. The current system, the one we use now, was really solidified, again, during feminism's first wave. So in the 60s and 70s, all the freaks and weirdos in North America became influenced by Eastern spirituality, like Tibetan Buddhism and Hinduism, both of which use the chakra system, though they're a little bit different. Therapy and, emotional self-discovery, focusing on yourself, all of that became very important for everyone who had wanted to expand their consciousness. Color theory and color therapy were very popular in psychology at the time. Witchcraft and that same Victorian occultism also had a resurgence in popularity, and that's why you had cool things like Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin buying Aleister Crowley's house and studying ceremonial magic. Then you have the activists, like our witchy-ass feminists out here taking back power for women. People were dropping acid and seeing psychedelic colors everywhere. The reason crazy colors became so popular was the same reason I decided to do this episode today. Because when the world moves from gray to brilliant color, there's no going back. There's no ignoring it. It's a whole new world. And this is what color, even specifically the rainbow configuration of color, has represented for us all along. Proof that what we think of as the mundane or the material and the spiritual are not separate. That they exist in the same place at the same time. They are both natural. They both occupy the same space. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Color is a light in the darkness. It's a communication tool, a language. It's a mirror reflecting back our emotions and our history. And it's a guide that we can follow to find our place in the universe. It's magic. I talked a little about the meanings ascribed to certain colors in modern witchcraft, but I hope I've shown you that this energy is not static and it's not out of your control. It's personal and it's subjective. There is no more important meaning or use of any color than the one that feels the most right to you. If purple means absolutely nothing to you, it won't help you in your magic. So what will? What is the color of magic? According to Terry Pratchett, it was octarine, the color of magic. It was alive and glowing and vibrant, and it was the undisputed pigment of the imagination. Because wherever it appeared, it was a sign that mere matter was a servant of the powers of the magical mind. It was enchantment itself. But Rincewind always thought it looked sort of greenish purple. I have to say, octarine sounds like the color of magic to me, but what color is it for you? Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm very excited to have a new episode out, and it is always my pleasure to share things like this that are both personal and magical with a little bit of weird trivia thrown in. So I hope you will join me here again on the next episode of the Fat Feminist Witch, which hopefully will not be quite so far away. If you want to learn more about me and the show, if you want to buy copies of my books and get recommendations for new sources of witchy knowledge or tarot decks or what have you, check out thefatfeministwitch.ca. I could not do the show at all without the support of my generous friends and followers on Patreon. And if you want to pitch in and get some extra content like monthly magical newsletters, visit patreon.com/thefatfeministwitch. I also have merch, tote bags, stickers, coffee cups, and of course, t-shirts, which go up to size 5X on my TeePublic shop. Finally, track me down on Facebook, Instagram, or Threads, where I can get a little bit more personal and really interact with y'all and answer some questions. I love that. The links to all of these avenues of connections can be found down in the description box below, and I hope you all have a magical weekend.